Good evening. The time is now 5:30 p.m. and I call the March 16, 2023 Alpharetta Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. Thank you to everyone in the room and online for joining us this evening. Please note for the record that all members from Board of Zoning Appeals are present tonight. I would like to ask if everyone in the room could please make sure that your phones and other mobile devices are silenced or turned off at this time. Our first order of business will be to elect the officers for 2023. Would someone like to make a nomination for chairman?
I'd like to make a nomination for Lisa Schipple as chairman.
Okay, Lisa Schipple, do you accept the nomination?
Wouldn't someone else prefer to be the chairperson?
Okay. Anybody else want to make a nomination?
Would you like to? No, I would be like vice or something, but I don't need to be the chairperson.
So,
I'm going to pass that.
okay.
I would nominate Mark Gerbler, please.
Okay. Mr. Gelber, yes.
Thanks.
Would you like to accept the nomination?
Sure, thank you.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, the next nomination that we have will be for vice chairman. Does anybody have a nomination?
Please. Would you like the nomination?
Would you like to nominate me again?
I'd like to nominate Lisa Schipple for vice chair.
Second.
Oh, okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. I would now turn the meeting over to Chairman Gelber.
Thank you. Ask everybody to stand for the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Everybody, you receive meeting minutes from 9/15/2022.
Yes.
Any changes or? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve. Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. Okay. Any items from board members? None? Any items from staff? No. Thank you. Okay, we have two public hearings this evening. The first is V2305 Caliber Car Wash, 1500 Mansell Road. This item was deferred by the applicant from the February 16th, 2023 to the March 16th meeting. It's consideration of a variance to reduce the front setback from 65 feet to 32 and a half feet to allow for redevelopment of the property with an automatic car wash. The property is located at 1500 Mansell Road and is legally described as being located in land lot 560, 1st District, 2nd Section, Fulton County, Georgia. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman and board members. The first item before you is a request for a variance from Caliber Car Wash. They're requesting to reduce the front setback along Mansell Road from 65 feet to 32 and a half feet. And this variance request was encouraged by staff, so the applicant came in to meet with us. The use is allowed on this property, and they did provide a code-compliant site plan, but in order to address some of our staff concerns with regard to aesthetics of the property, we did encourage the applicant to seek the variance to reduce the front setback. As Chairman mentioned, this property is located at 1500 Mansell Road. It's at the east corner of Mansell Road and West Side Parkway. We have a location map here showing the location of the property. And then the initial site plan, the code compliant site plan, is shown here. So you've got Mansell and West Side Parkway. On this particular site plan, so this site plan meets code, does not require any variances. The building for the car wash is set back from the street, and then all the auto detailing stations are between that building and the street. So we had concerns about the way that that would look from the corner of Mansell and West Side. So the applicant did come back, and this is the variance requested, the site plan with the variance request. So you have Mansell here and West Side Parkway here. The building has been brought up to the street. So this is the building with the 32.5-foot setback from Mansell. And then all the auto detailing stations that have canopies with the vacuum stations, those are all kind of tucked behind the building, helping screen those from the street. So the property is a little over 1 acre. It is zoned LI, light industrial, which does allow a car wash by right. So they could develop the property with the car wash without coming before this board. Property is currently developed with a 2-story bank with drive-through. So they would tear down the existing building and redevelop the property. As I mentioned, this addresses staff concerns with aesthetics. It also addresses our concerns with the stacking in the car wash facility. So on the code compliant plan, vehicles would enter off of Mansell Road, and they would enter the automatic car wash building at this location here. There's a shorter amount of stacking for the vehicles on this plan, as opposed to this plan where vehicles would enter and stack this entire distance here. So there's, I believe this stacking allows for 10 cars to stack up to enter the car wash. This plan, the code compliant plan, only has 6 spaces for stacking. So staff reviewed this request. Of course, we encourage the applicant to seek the variance, and we are supportive of this variance request. Of course, the use is allowed within the zoning of the property. And we believe that this is a better layout. If approved, we are recommending some conditions. The applicant did provide a citizen participation plan, and they did not receive any comments from the public. And so staff is recommending approval subject to 5 conditions, and I'll go through those. Condition 1 is the site plan specific condition tying it to the site plan by Carter Harkle Road Group dated 12/27/22 with a 32.5-foot setback. Building 2 addresses the appearance of the building, and I failed to discuss the renderings of the building. So we have the renderings of the proposed car wash building here. This car wash was taken to Design Review Board last month for a cursory review, just so the applicant could get some feedback on the overall look of the site, landscaping, and the building. And the applicant was directed by the Design Review Board to that they should go for the option with the gray roof. There was another option that showed a bright blue roof on the building, so they are showing this gray roof. So condition 2 addresses the building. Building shall have the appearance of a 25-foot tall structure and shall be substantially similar to the elevations depicting a gray roof prepared by Alex Roush Architects dated 1/23/23 with final approval by DRB. So they are scheduled, if they are approved for this variance tonight, they will go to DRB tomorrow morning, hopefully to get an approval for their building and landscape. Condition 3 ties them to the landscape by Manley Land Design, which represents what you see here. So this is their landscape plan. So they have added some additional landscaping along Mansell Road as well as at the corner, and you'll hear some of our conditions here that address landscaping and specifically at those locations. Condition 4 says that the developer shall assess site landscaping and replace dead, dying, or missing landscape material. So there's existing landscaping on the property. We're just asking them to look at that and replace anything that's dead, dying, or missing. And then condition 5, developer shall plant additional shrubs and ornamental grasses in the landscape strip along Mansell Road and Westside Parkway. These plantings shall be installed near the highest ground elevations to provide additional site screening as approved by DRB. And again, we do believe that this landscape plan that they'll be showing to DRB tomorrow does meet these conditions. And that concludes the staff report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question.
Please.
So entrance off of Mansell, they're entering on their own property? Question mark?
Oh. So the entrance, so this is the entrance off of Mansell. So this is a shared entrance, and there's interparcel access between this property and the adjacent property.
Okay, because I'm looking at the overlay where you see the, I guess it's the Volkswagen dealership to the right?
Yes, the Volkswagen
And there's an
dealership.
entrance on Mansell. So is that going to be the shared? So so basically it's you're entering on the Volkswagen property with an easement to get to the car wash?
I believe the property line, so that is correct. So the property line is right down the middle of that driveway. And so this is a shared driveway for both properties. So technically, yes, cars do enter onto the Volkswagen property and go onto this property.
No, that's fine. I was just curious because I see the entrance that, on what I'm looking at, the aerial view, it shows the entrance clearly on the Volkswagen site. And so, but that looks to me like it's on the car wash site, which means that there would be like 15 feet between two entrances. Okay.
This I can tell you that our transportation engineer has
I
reviewed
don't-
it, and it is met his standards.
Okay.
But I definitely understand the concern.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Parks Huff of the law firm of Sams, Larkin and Huff, and I represent Caliber Car Wash in relation to this variance before you today. And this is exactly how this system is supposed to work. It had us sit down with the staff early on in the process as we were getting ready to do the DRB submission, and we realized that there was a couple of different ways to do the layout, one of which everyone preferred required a variance. So staff said, please apply for a variance. And then they worked with us on the timing so that we could get before y'all quickly and also track the DRB at the same time. Excellent question about the access point, because this has got the typical variance needs, which is you got extreme topography going on here. So this bank site sits 10 plus feet below the intersection of Mansell Road. There's a retaining wall there. And so one scenario is you could bring the whole site up to be at road grade, but we have a shared all our access points are shared with the adjacent properties. The Nissan dealership and the dealership behind us all share an access point. So we can't change those access points, so we can't change the grade inside. So that's driving these issues of how do we get the stacking, how do we get people in, and then how do we put a building that has a nice presentation to the road. And so it was actually staff that challenged us to come up with this layout that puts the building up close to the road, puts the vacuum stations in the back, works better for access for everybody. As the staff noted, it is zoned light industrial. This is a permitted use. I know sometimes car washes are not the most favored use sometimes, but when you got an area surrounded by car dealerships, this actually makes the most sense to put a car wash here. And I will always like to emphasize that if you're going to wash your car, the only environmentally responsible way to wash your car is with a modern tunnel car wash that recycles the water. So washing at home, it's not the right thing to do. Old style that doesn't recycle isn't the thing to do. So if you're going to wash your car, this is the most responsible, environmentally responsible way to do it. The tunnel car washes are all modern equipment with all the recycling going on. We've worked diligently with your staff and appreciate them. So we're going to be presenting all this to the DRB tomorrow with the landscaping that's detailed and the architecture that's detailed in here. So we simply ask that you follow your staff's recommendation and approve this variance. It is one of those ones that just makes infinite sense because the location works better for access, stacking, visual, all those things. And given the grade topography, it actually makes a whole lot of sense. And so it's being able to take this site that's looks great on a flat piece of paper. You see signalized intersection, what better commercial, but when you realize it's 10 feet below grade, it's a challenge to make it work. And my clients have done a good job of working with their engineers to come up with a site plan that works. I've submitted to you what you've seen here, which is a code compliant plan. So we could build it in compliance, but that isn't the preferred. You can see the aerial photograph showing the existing bank building, and it's been vacant for a while. And see how much below grade it sits and how much of a challenge that is. Then you can get to our architecture that we worked with everyone on. They didn't like the blue roof, so we're at a gray roof now. Not sure why blue is a disfavored color, but seriously, it was a little loud on the roof, so we agreed to make it the gray. So we ask that you follow your staff recommendation, and if there's any questions that I can answer, please let me know. Also have Representative Caliber who can answer your questions also. So thank you for your time, and I thank staff for their efforts in helping us get through this process, get to before y'all in a timely manner, so that hopefully we can build this new car wash to serve the surrounding community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just have one, and I may be looking at it wrong. The first page of the package, is it the same as the landscape? It looks like on the, or is I'm just missing out in front of the building, there's just a drive that's not shown?
The first one is code compliant. So the first slide is what would be the building all the way in the back and the vacuum stations up front. That's one of y'all's requirements to show a code compliant one. The next one shows the building shifted within that front setback, and that pushes everything up.
Thank you.
And then the landscape plan follows the second.
That's what I mean.
Please.
I have a question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't catch your last name.
Huff.
Mr. Hunt, thank you for your commitment and putting the time and investment actually on Alpharetta. We're grateful for you working around trying to make things work out, so we're happy to see that. I know that intersection is really great intersections. I was involved in the past with the car wash business. I'm sure traffic flow and all that, I'm sure it will be in the future. It's a good investment for you. Question I have is, whenever we have development like that, is a traffic always concerning issue with the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I understand there is an entrance on the Mansell side, there's also on west side,
Yes,
2 entrances going to be.
correct.
Because I understand on the weekend, most likely there will be higher traffic, and we just want to make sure that, there's enough traffic actually to accommodate, which will give you actually opportunity to ensure your business. At the same time, there will not be any neighborhood complaints. So I just wanted to make sure there's 2 entrances on both sides.
Yep, there's an entrance on both roads. Both those entrances are shared with interparcel access amongst them, so it provides good access, not just for us, but for the adjacent businesses also. And they're already defined. And the car wash business, certainly they thrive on the right turn movements. People don't, make an effort to turn left. They make it an easy route. They'll wash their car at a different time if they're turning left. They'll wait till they're turning right in. So that's especially during rush hour. During other times when it's easier, maybe so, but during rush hour, they rely upon right in, right outs as their main customer base.
Thank you.
And this coming in, they can exit on both places too?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I would like to applaud you and Caliber Car Wash, and along with the city of Alpharetta, for working together and collaborating on something that's good for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is the way it works well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment? No? Okay. Any motion from board? Motion approved. Second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
Let's approve any conditions submitted by staff, correct?
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. Switch the signs a second and we'll get going. Okay, the next item is 263 Canton Street appeal. It's a consideration of an appeal to an administrative decision related to the notice of violation for tree removal. The property is located at 263 Canton Street and is legally described as being in land lot 1197, 2nd District, 2nd Section, Fulton County, Georgia. Mr. Wooden?
Thank you again, Chairman and board members. Jarvis Tree Experts is before you this evening requesting consideration of an appeal to administrative decision. This is related to a violation notice that was dated November 16, 2022, and then that notice was updated on February 1st, 2023. This is related to a violation of subsection 3.2.6, related to the removal of a 33-inch water oak based on incorrect data. The incorrect data resulted in the decision to allow the tree to be removed, and the updated data in the October 2022 resistograph report was insufficient to determine whether or not the tree was a specimen tree. The violation does require that the appellant pay a fine and provide recompense of 3 times the caliper inches removed, or 99 inches, to be planted on the subject property or paid into the city's tree bank. As the chairman mentioned, the property is located at 263 Canton Street. That's the east side of Canton Street, just north of Mayfield Road. And do have some information on the boards for you. I'll go through. Set some of this stuff to the side. Losing my space. So this tree removal came about in conjunction with a residential land disturbance permit. So we had a request to demolish an existing home on the property and then to rebuild a home on the property. So the site plan that you see on the end board here represents 260, the subject property. The tree in question that was removed is actually off-site on the adjacent property. So what happened, and this is included in your packet, so this represents the footprint of the existing home and their driveway that was demolished. And then a new home was shown on the land disturbance permit on a different plan that I don't have on the board. But that driveway was moved to this side of the property, and due to the location of that driveway over here, it impacted this tree. So they did seek a request to remove that tree. When the land disturbance permit was submitted to the city, it was included with the land disturbance permit. There was a June 2022 resistograph report that was submitted with that. The city arborist reviewed that information and asked the applicant to update some information on the report. And so that updated report depicted the 33-inch water oak with a 23-inch cavity in the center of the tree. And that is depicted in this drawing here. So here is the 33-inch water oak. And so based on the resistograph measurements that were taken of this tree, this document was prepared by the applicant and submitted to the city. They showed a 23-inch decay, center of decay in that tree. Based on that information, the city did approve the residential land disturbance permit, which included the tree removals that were shown on the plan. That was done on August 17th, 2022. On September 19th, 2022, The city was made aware that this tree had been removed and that there was no decay observed in the tree. And the photographs that we have here represent the tree in question. Of course, the city reached out to the applicant, who's the appellant in this case, and just asked for an explanation. And the response that the city was provided, which was provided on October 20th, 2022, indicated that there had been a mistake made in the preparation of the original report, and they provided a new report, which is the October 2022 resistograph report. After reviewing that information, the city did issue a notice of violation. That was issued on November 16th, 2022, and then we updated the violation to make sure that we were referencing the proper sections of the Unified Development Code, and that was updated on February 1st, 2023. The appellant, in their notice of appeal, has stated that the city arborist had sufficient information in order to, based on photographs that were provided in that initial June 2022 and the updated June 2022 reports, as well as a site visit. So the city arborist did go out to the site and made visual observations at that site visit. So the appellant is stating that the city arborist had enough information based on the pictures and the site visit to allow for the removal of the tree. However, the city arborist contends that his decision also included the resistograph report, so what the tree looked like on the inside of the tree. And of course, that decay or cavities would not be apparent necessarily just based on a visual observation of that tree. The appellant also claims in the notice of appeal that the tree is not a specimen tree. However, the resistograph information that was provided in the October report, we believe was just for a small section of the tree. That report indicates that readings were taken at 313 degrees, 318 degrees, and 319 degrees. If you think of a circle 360 degrees, you need to get at various points of that circumference of that circle in order to see what's on the inside. So we feel like they only took a slice of the tree and looked at what was going on the inside. So based on that, the city arborist believed that we did not have sufficient information in order to determine whether the tree was healthy or not, so we couldn't determine whether it was, so it couldn't be verified if it was a specimen or not. And then in the applicant's latest update to their notice of appeal, they did indicate that not only that the tree was a specimen, but it was also a hazard, and they did reference a failure in the upper canopy. The failure in the upper canopy, I did check with the city arborist, and that there was never any evidence of that provided with any of the 3 tree reports that were provided. I do have the city arborist, David Shostak, with me this evening, and he is a lot more informed about this than I. But that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. But we do have the appellant here to make their argument as well.
Thank you. Any questions for?
I have one. So for clarification, is this tree on the property in question, or it's on the property next?
So 263 is the property, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, 263 is the property that requested the demolition, or the neighboring property requested the demolition. This is 263 is this property here, the adjacent property. Is that correct? Yeah. So 263 is this property, the neighboring property. I don't recall, I can look it up for you, I don't recall the address of the property that requested the land disturbance permit.
Okay, thank you.
We do have this happen occasionally when properties are developed. They may get close to their boundaries of the property, and they may impact things on other people's property, including trees.
So the original data that the resistograph, I guess it's called, in June, why was that incorrect? Do you know why that was it for a different tree or?
David, do you want to respond to that?
Will you say your name again, please?
My name is David Shostak. I'm city arborist, chairman and board. The answer to that question was never provided to us by the tree company that did the resistograph reading. So we don't know if it was from a different tree, from a different height in the tree. We just don't have that information.
So how does that normally happen? If someone gives you a resistograph, how do you determine if it's the right tree or the right?
So normally in a situation, you kind of have to trust that it is the correct resistograph and it's from the tree. And typically the readings are like EKG readings, and on there you take notes and you write tree number, tree size. There's information on there to let you know. And you can tell if you want by diameter, size, things like that. In this instance, the only reason we knew it was incorrect data is because after the tree was cut down, there was no decay at the height where they said they took the reading. So that was the only reason we knew.
Can I ask a question? Could the reading have been from a different height? Like, could it have been the height that was messed up and not the wrong tree?
On this instance, probably not, based on the diameter that they said where they took the reading and based on the results of the reading. Because if they took it at the higher location, the decay that they said on their later readings would have been much smaller than what the original readings showed.
And then, and so someone from the city and the tree company, they go out and look at the tree?
Yeah, I was requested to come out and take a look at the tree. And while I was out there, I asked for more information because what I saw was not enough for me to make that determination without additional information.
That was back in June, is that what you're referring to? Or whenever, originally?
Yeah, originally.
So do you always go back afterward and look at the trees if someone has said there's a decay in there?
No, we do not always go back. This one, just for your information, these photographs were provided to us.
So who discovered that the tree was taken down incorrectly and brought it to the attention of the city? Was that you or a neighbor?
So it was a resident. So a resident who had some concern about tree removals in the city in general saw that the tree had come down and had done a request for the report on that tree before it came down. And then when it came down, he called me and said there was no decay as the report stated. So
I have another question. So some random city resident went on the property of someone else?
No.
And started taking pictures? No?
This is up near the road. They were on the sidewalk and in the right of way. They did not enter the property as far as I know, but I can't guarantee any of that because I was not with them.
And then they took a picture of every part of the tree to send to the city?
Those are the pictures right there. That's what they took.
And so I'm just asking because as a city resident, and this just, I don't know. So do we know that all of the tree pieces were there when this guy was taking the picture, or girl?
From the photograph, it appears that
the
whole tree is there except for the branches, with the leaves on it and stuff like that. The main components of the tree are there.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So when the report came back, do you look at the report and say, okay, well, based on my site visit, this is in line with what I was seeing as an arborist, as well as the arborist for Jarvis Tree Service? Did it, was it something like that you were going to question whether or not it was the same tree?
I had no reason to question whether the data provided to me was right or wrong and was right for the right tree or not. So based on the site visit and based on the additional information provided to me, which showed that this tree was basically hollow, then the decision was made based on that information that the tree would not be considered a specimen and could be removed without any replanting requirements.
Was the, I said, that was, I only had one more question, but I have one more. So the second report that was provided, was that the right report for that particular tree?
As far as I know, it was not. The second report was provided and the readings did not match the narrative. So I asked for, again, for that to be corrected.
Okay, thank you.
When was the tree actually cut down?
Do you have that? I think it was, I believe it was in May or, no, September.
September, okay, yeah. 'cause he's-
September 19th.
Yeah, September 19th is around the date that it was removed. That was when we were made aware.
So if I can add a question with that, I understand there's a reporting that has to be made 3 times, and I see some communication in October to you saying the report is being mistaken and all that. So I'm trying to understand really the intention of at the beginning. Is it genuine mistake, or because there's 2-3 reports that to get it correct for you? So I was just wondering.
Yeah, that I can't answer that. I wouldn't know if it was intentional or not.
When the resistograph is submitted to you, the report, does it note property, date, time, et cetera, indicating that you know, that comes with it to give you an understanding of that that's supposed to be the tree in question? I mean, does it take?
It should include all of that information. Yeah. The report should tell when the reading was taken. It should tell what property it's on. It should tell the height. It should tell the point on the tree, north, south, east, west, or compass bearing. It should include all of that information.
Well, I'd like to ask you how that, there could be mixed up, but I'll wait and ask the applicant how that gets mixed up.
Yeah, I think that's a question for the applicant.
Couple of questions. Just looking at some pictures of the tree here, are there any other, was there any visible sign, is there a readings done, you inspected, based on the conditions of what you're looking at the tree, it looks to be a reasonable report. So obviously the tree didn't look completely healthy. There was the report that they've done, visual inspection of it, it didn't look questionable. It looked, I mean, you went along with.
Well, so the inspection by me was requested by the design engineer, and then I requested additional information. After I got the additional information, it did not go back out there because the tree was deemed to be hollow. And I asked them to provide me with a strength loss equation, and the strength loss equation, I believe, is up there, and I think it said that it had a 41% strength loss based on there being a hollow portion of the tree. Industry standard is to be comfortable around 30-ish or less. So this was above that threshold. So I used the data mostly of the resistograph reading and the strength loss equation to make the decision, only to find out later that the tree was not hollow.
Were there any other, I mean, I'm looking at, see it looks like a saw stuck down in I don't know, a nest cavity that is called there.
Yeah, they're calling it a nesting cavity.
Yeah. Were there other features of tree that would make it questionable? Just on visual inspection, when you look at it, that would take it out of a specimen category?
So when I did my inspection at the time, there was nothing there that would have said this is not a specimen to me. There were some issues with the tree, yes, but some of the issues could potentially have been treated or been pruned off or something like that to make it a safer or less risk, lower risk or something like that. But again, I asked for the additional information, which I was provided with. Turns out to be that was incorrect data, and the decision was made on the incorrect data. In addition to everything else, you know, obviously with a tree, if you have issues, they compound upon each other. So the more you have, the worse it is. The less you have, the better it is. So knowing what I know now, we had less issues. So the decision could have been made to go back out and look at the tree again and make a decision, but I wouldn't have done that based on the resistograph readings.
One last question, because it pulls off of the question he stated where it gets the intention. The driveway could have easily been placed somewhere. This wasn't, this, just so I make sure in my mind, this tree wasn't in the middle of an area that's going to prevent development. So it's the driveway, it's up close to the road, probably pretty close to the right of way to begin with, especially if someone's standing in a right of way taking pictures. So, I mean, they could have repositioned that section of the driveway to get I'm just trying to validate in myself.
Yes.
When I look at there. So
yes, and I don't want to speak for the owners,
right,
because this came from the design engineer.
Right.
The owners wanted the driveway shifted from the south side of the property to the north side of the property. This tree was not even requested for removal in the initial submittal. It wasn't even included in the initial arborist report that we got. So this was after the design started, then the owners wanted to shift the driveway, and that is where this tree came into play. So the driveway could have remained where it was and would have been no issues.
Yeah, so that answers mine.
Can I ask a question as a feed off to that one? I mean, for me, looking at this survey, it seems there's a lot more trees on the south side of the property. Did the homeowner want to move the driveway because there's less interference with trees? Like, do we know any of that?
From what I understood, the homeowner wanted to move the driveway because they wanted the garage on the north side of the property, and they didn't want a driveway coming across the front yard to the north side. That was the original design, had a driveway that came down the south side, came across the front yard to match up with the garage on the left or on the north. So they wanted a straighter driveway. That was my understanding from the design engineer.
I just have one question. Are resistographs always accurate? Do they need calibrating, or is there something?
Yes, resistographs do need calibrating. Just to give you a quick definition, a resistograph is a drill, and it measures the resistance on the drill bit. And it puts out a little graph, like I said, like an EKG. So the higher the resistance, the higher it shows on the graph, which means the more wood is sound. The lower the resistance means the more wood is unsound or decayed or gone. And they do need calibrating. I don't know what the calibration schedule is, but they do need calibrating, and they do have various settings on them. So you really need to know how to use it. You need to know how to set it. And you need to know if it needs calibrating or not. So it is a technical piece of equipment, and it is a tool. It is just a tool, and it gives you data that you need to learn and understand how to interpret.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
The appellants.
Good afternoon. How are y'all doing? My name is Andrea Pearson. I'm from Bloom Parham, and we are representing Jarvis Tree Experts and Josh Jarvis, which received the notice of violation from the city, which y'all have heard a lot about. I kind of want to set forth, there are basically 3 grounds for our appeal. First of all, you guys have already keyed in on this. This was not a knowing violation. This is not somebody who walked out in their backyard and cut down a tree without a permit. Here the required documentation was submitted, but it included data that was inadvertently incorrect. Criminal penalties in the imposition of a $29,000 penalty, that's what we're talking about here, and on top of the $1,000 fine, is not justified in this circumstance. Also, this tree created a danger to human life and property, which hasn't really been touched on much yet. Also, based on the data that was presented in the corrected report, we believe, and it's our position, and it's supported in the affidavit and the documents we've submitted, this was not a specimen tree based on its condition, which it was diseased and decaying. And based on, our arborist assessment, the only option here was to remove the tree based on the information provided. So you guys have already gotten some of the orientation here, but this, in your packet, you'll see this home is located on Canton Street, and this tree, as you will see, is located almost directly adjacent to the Canton Street right-of-way. And the limb that we are talking about here, you'll be able to see in your packet, there's some photographs. The limb where the decay started was overhanging the right-of-way and the sidewalk and basically where the new driveway was going to be located, which is a very important factor. So as they have already kind of set forth, the city arborist with Tim McDowell, who was an arborist with Jarvis Tree Experts, and also Joe Schifani went out to inspect this tree. And at the time after the inspection, Jarvis Tree Experts prepared a report with the resistograph information requested. And also in the report, which is in Exhibit A to our notices of appeal, which you have in your packets, your hand packets, it did, again, we know the resistograph readings were incorrect. We're not disagreeing that those were not the correct readings, but the photographs of the tree were correct, and Mr. Shostak went out to the property to visually view the tree. There's also correct notes in the report regarding the 6-inch nesting cavity in the bifurcation of the limb, meaning where the limb kind of where it meets the stem of the tree. That's the bifurcation. There was a nesting cavity in that bifurcation where there was also some decay. And that was accurately described in the report that was provided to the city. The limb itself is also accurately described as a 12 to 14-inch limb overhanging the roadway. So after receiving this information, Mr. Shostak provided the permit, and then again, we do agree after the tree was removed, it was discovered that the resistograph information was incorrect. And promptly upon, figuring that out, the supplemental readings were provided for the resistograph, which is also in your report or your materials as our Exhibit B. So this, again, was not a knowing removal of a tree. They were completely upfront about what they were doing, what they were trying to do. They submitted the requested documentation to the city. The LDP plans, which are in your online packet, showed a letter from the homeowners who were building the new home to the owner of 263 saying, we plan to remove this tree. Please let us know that you consent. Our arborist has found that it's diseased and decaying. Let us know for sure that we can move forward. That approval was given by the owner. The LDP plans also show that the tree is to be removed. This was not based on any knowing false submission of data. It was a mix-up with respect to the readings, and as soon as it was discovered, the corrected information was provided. And then also with respect to this tree, we believe that it was exempt under the UDC's requirements because it was hazardous. So UDC 3.2.36 provides an exemption for the removal of any tree which is dead or has become or threatens to become a danger to human life or property. So it's our position that because of the limb overhanging the road, which is where the decay was, and it was going into the stem of the tree, that limb created an imminent risk of life frankly to life and property, and such that the UDC provisions did not apply to it. And then with respect to whether or not it was a specimen tree does require consideration of the condition. And for the same reasons, the tree was not a specimen because it was diseased and hazardous. You've seen the photos of the tree, but the resistograph reports confirm that it was diseased and hazardous, which if you look on page, I guess in the corrected readings, if you could turn to the corrected readings, which are in Exhibit B to our notice, and it's also on, I guess, page 98 of your online packet. So you can find it in a couple places. So staff has pointed out that the readings were only taken at 318 degrees, 313 degrees, and 319 degrees, but they overlook that the readings were at different feet of the tree. So there was a reading at 17.5 feet above ground, which was actually, let me get my picture. So the reading at 17.5 feet was below, this is the bifurcation here. This is where the nesting cavity, canker cavity was, and here's the bleeding. So you can kind of see the change in color here is the bleeding of this canker. So the first reading of the resistograph was below the bleeding. The second reading, as described in the report, was at 19 feet, which was the lower area of the bleeding. And then the third reading was taken at 21 feet, right around where the decay is seen in the photograph. And all three of those readings showed that there was soft tissue in the tree. So those locations were specifically selected for them to be able to determine whether or not the decay in the limb was moving into the stem of the tree. So they've said, one of the things, the tree might heal itself. Well, if the decay has moved into the stem, it's not going to heal itself because it has moved past, I guess maybe, the technical term is the walls of the limb. So it has moved past that area down into the stem of the tree. So there was soft tissue. If you look at 106, that shows the resistograph readings, the corrected readings, and you can see the dates on those. You can see the dips, which is what shows the soft tissue. And also in the report, it states, particularly at 19 and 21 feet, there were 5 inches of disrupted tissue and then 4 to 5 inches of disrupted tissue at those two different locations, showing there's decay moving into the stem of the tree, not just isolated in the limb, it's moving into the stem. So one of the things that the staff report mentions is that this tree may recover from the decay. Well, the large limb being exposed constantly to wind and the other elements essentially isn't going to be able to heal itself. And then pruning was also mentioned as a mitigation tactic. But the UDC requires that pruning be done in compliance with the ANSI standard 300, and that standard requires that pruning that removes a branch at its point of origin shall be made close to the trunk or parent limb without cutting into the branch bark, ridge, or collar, meaning like where the limb meets the tree. So here, to get rid of the decay, you would have had to cut into that branch bark collar, which is in violation of the arborist standards. And also, you're not allowed to take more than 25% of the tree because that can also create a risk to the health of the tree. And here, this limb was well more than 25%. It's in our affidavit of Mr. Jarvis describing, I think it was closer to a third of the tree because it was 14 inches and 10.99 would have been 25%. So this was well over the 25% that was allowed for an arborist to say, yes, we can prune as a mitigation tactic. With respect to letting this tree try to heal itself or using something like fungicide, and as we've supported in our affidavit, when you're considering mitigation, you have to consider what's the likelihood of failure and the risk if it fails. So here, our position was, given the decay in the limb, the likelihood of failure was practically certain. And the risk, if it fails, is very significant, because I guess the term is the target. The target here is Canton Street. So you can't take that risk that the limb could just maybe try to heal itself, because if it doesn't, you are potentially hurting property or people. So when they're determining, as an arborist, what's the proper thing to do to cure this problem, you can't prune because it violates the standards. You can't leave it or use a lesser mitigation strategy like fungicide, because it's just such an imminent risk to people or property. So those are essentially why we believe that, essentially, regardless of the mistake that was made, the right result happened here. This tree needed to come down, and you know, they haven't shown or haven't even said that, no, this wasn't, or this was a specimen tree, which they are trying to impose sanctions against us based on it being a specimen tree, which we believe our materials show it wasn't, and they haven't shown that it was, which is what they need to do in order to enforce such harsh sanctions against us. And so basically, you know, we don't believe that over $30,000 in penalties is proper under the UDC, or, you know, the right just result in this situation. Excuse me. So do y'all have any questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Jarvis didn't actually cut the tree down, did they?
Correct. That's in our affidavit. They were not involved in the actual removal of the tree. They were hired to provide the assessment of the tree. They were not the company that removed the tree.
Do we know who cut the tree?
I don't know. No, sir.
How was the erroneous, the mix-up in the actual tree and a different tree? How did that come about?
Just say your name, please.
My name is Joe Shafani. I'm the COO of Jarvis Tree Experts. So we did a number of resistograph readings on that site. So the arborist that did the report, I can't speak to, you know, his error here, but it's possible that he mixed up the resistographs from another tree that we took on site and the tree that we did, because we did climb into that tree, do I think 3 readings from that limb to show the growth of the decay in the stem and on the limb, as well as readings on the trunk of the tree at the base. We did not submit the readings of the trunk at the base because, I mean, they show right there. I mean, there was no real presence of decay at the base. But as due diligence, we do the affected area that we see, which was the nesting cavity that from your package you can see the handsaw that is about this long in length that went all the way in there and would have gone further. I was the arborist that climbed into the tree, so I do know that it was pretty well affected with decay. So as to why he mixed it up, I apologize, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. How many of the trees did you do that process to?
On that property, I think it was 2. So there was another tree on the other side of the driveway, which we didn't find any, decay there. So it's possible he mixed it up at his desk. I usually take a Sharpie and write down the address, the compass coordinates, and the number of readings that I took on that job. So I wasn't the one that actually was doing the report, unfortunately, for this case, but yes, sir.
So you typically, like your lowest reading was at 17.5 feet?
Yes, sir.
How often do you do lower? If you don't see anything visual, would you do lower readings, or?
Well, so as Ms. Pearson stated, there was bleeding that was coming from the wound. So typically it's a standard procedure for us. We do the limb itself and then right beneath it. And as we continued to see decay, we wanted to see how far it went. So at that point, we become more of scientists just to see, well, let's see how far it goes, because there was a a previous limb that failed and fell towards where the previous owner's car would have been, but they were out that day. So yes, there's no sign of like damage to the property, but there was previous failure that we were made aware of, so, yeah.
Any other questions?
Just to ask a quick one, actually. I understand the company who cut the tree is a different company.
Yes,
right?
sir. Mhm.
Was it being admitted at all? And it's something that I understand that the city is trying to make someone accountable for the mistakes we made in. Shouldn't you be going against the cutting company because the penalty is, it's known that it was a mistake, but I understand that from the explanation, you were trying to convince us that the actual tree is really decayed and was supposed to be cut off. Is this something that, you guys should be going against actually the company who cut the tree?
Well, this is a notice of violation from the city to us, so we're, defending ourselves against that violation. And given it was their report, we feel like we are here to repeal that because we think that was an error for them to cite us for an inadvertent mistake in the data provided by us in order to have the tree cut.
At what height was the resistograph employed? At what height on the tree?
There was multiple heights, but I think it was 21, 19, and 17 feet, as well as a report we did not.
What's the gentleman doing there?
That's me, and I did that. That's the base one that we did. That I don't think we submitted those. Or, yeah.
Any idea of what that showed?
With those resistograph readings,
Right.
it was normal at best. There was slight pockets of decay, but nothing that would be, damning evidence for that tree. I apologize. Yeah.
Do you typically only report on the negative readings and not the positive readings?
No, but this case, the client was asking for us to, help them get a permit for removal. So on this particular tree, that was the area that we thought was going to be the most affected and give us the best results because of the decay that was present on our first initial level 1 tree assessment inspection. So when we came out for our third level inspection, we did the resistograph up in the tree as well as on the ground. And that was more so to cover our basis, just to see, well, let's see how far that decay went, because at 21, 19, and 17, there was presence of soft tissue on that tree from that cavity. We wanted to see really how far it went down. So it was more of a, hey, let's see,
So the homeowner wanted the tree removed?
I don't know that. I didn't speak to the homeowner. I do know that the plans for the driveway were to go right there, but that rarely weighs into our decision making on how to write a report. I mean, all we do is collect evidence and then report on it. That is plain and simple all we do. To do anything else would be, I think, negligent.
Question. So had the corrected report been submitted to the city as first requested, would this have been approved by the city? Would the permit have been approved by the city? I guess that's more a question for our city
So
arbiter.
your question is like if the decay, the 17, 19, 20, or the 21, 19, 17, if that report? been
Well, the one that they submitted in
Correct.
October,
The
the
correct one.
corrected one for would
Yeah.
it would have been approved with that
So-
report?
If I had received that report first, I would have gone back out to the tree and done another investigation to see, did I believe that that was actually a problem? The cavity size that they're talking about, based on the resistograph readings of the entire stem, is like a 5-inch maximum cavity. I don't know what the diameter of the trunk was at that height, but so it was a fairly small pocket. So, and they talk about pruning. We would have probably discussed pruning at that time to see if removing that limb that they're calling is the most hazardous part of the tree, taking it off would have made sense. So those were things that we would have discussed at the time, but did not have the opportunity to do that.
So both reports that were submitted to you were both incorrect readings of the tree in question?
The first report was incorrect readings, and I don't remember the second report if the readings were correct or not, but the narrative in the report did not match the readings that were provided. So I asked for that to be corrected again. I do not know if those were the same readings that I received on the third time, but they also had different heights that the readings were taken in the three different reports. I believe the second report still stated that the readings were done at ground level. So the first report said ground level, the second report said ground level, and the third report said they climbed and did those. So there were three very inconsistent reports that were provided to the city. You know, the last one, we're told, is the corrected report.
So the narrative did not match the
Right.
report as submitted?
Yes.
Is the one picture up to the left there, is that considered soft decay in the middle? The one, is that what, it's kind of like a little.
That's just fibers from
The little black spot, is it, or the
Yeah,
dark
the
spot?
black spot,
Yeah.
that's not decay.
Oh, no, that is decay.
Oh, that is decay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
and that is in the.
Yeah, actually, all of those pictures have spots of decay on the, yes, right there, even the bottom picture in the center, and then even on the trunk, there's multiple spots, tiny spots, but there are signs of decay that were transpiring down the stem, which is part of our argument.
Does every tree have a little bit of that, or is that?
No, not every tree.
How significant is that decay?
On the
On
largest
the-
portion, I mean, on itself, without any other knowledge, I would say, not that bad, you know? But when you take in consideration how big that, now she said it was a 14-inch limb. Now, we have to times 1.3, 3.14 times 14 inches. That's the actual,
That's about 44 inches.
yeah, it's
All
about
the way
as thick
around.
as my waist right now. So it's quite a big limb, and there's really no way for that limb to ever recover from whether it's a 5-inch cavity or not. You could stick that saw all the way up and all the way down. So, I mean, I don't think have the opening, because trees form response growth that helps seal wounds, and the fact that it was bleeding and the presence of decay was continuing to transpire down doesn't really show signs of the tree being able to mitigate that itself.
And just one point of clarification, the third report is what we are saying is the corrected report. So I believe there may have still been, I think he was referencing an accurate description in the second report. The third report had the corrected resistograph and description in it.
We're saying this is a 32-inch water oak. Is that 32-inch circumference, diameter, what?
So it's 30, I think it was 33 or whatever it said on the report is accurate, because we use a diameter tape, which is the number of inches times 3.14. So it's if you actually took a tape measure, it would be, almost triple that.
Yeah.
So it's not actually
So it's
14 inches, yeah.
Okay.
Because it goes around, yes, sir.
Can I clear that? So that, let me get here.
So when you're talking about the diameter of a tree, and we're talking about a 32-inch or 33-inch diameter, that is at 4.5 feet from the ground. That is the straight line across. That's how wide the tree is. The circumference is around. In arboriculture and forestry, you talk about diameter. You don't necessarily talk about circumference. So 33 inches is about this big. So that trunk of that tree at 4.5 feet is this big. When you're talking about diameter of the branch, it's about 14 inches, is about this big, and that's about how big the branch was hanging up in the tree over here. If you do 14 times 3.14, that's the distance around. It's a lot easier to kind of visualize the diameter, the straight line across, and looking at something like this. So that's about 14 inches. This is about 33 inches. So that's kind of helps you visualize what we're talking about here in sizes.
In your opinion, with the bleeding and the branch separation, I mean, is that a factor? I know that the resistograph was not correct, but
Yeah, so I have seen many trees survive and thrive with bleeding canker. So to me, if you treat a tree and you fertilize it, it can outgrow. And when I say outgrow, meaning put on sound wood on the outside, so any decay and any defects inside become a smaller percentage of the overall tree. So as the tree grows, that doesn't get as big and stays. So I have seen that. You know, and again, without being able to go back and having looked at the tree based on that information, I can't make that judgment on this tree.
Can I ask you a question while you're there?
Sure.
The Jarvis tree, have you had any other issues? Have you had any other issues like this with them? I mean,
I've not had any other issues like this with any other companies, nor with Jarvis Tree Experts. You know,
worked with them a good bit over the.
I want to say that I feel like Jarvis Tree Experts has been around for like 5 years. Is that correct?
3 years in June.
3 years in June. So, yeah, they're a fairly new company in the grand scheme of things. So it's only been the last few years.
Mr. Shelton, how long have you worked as an arborist?
I've been with the city of Alpharetta for over 16 years.
Any idea how many permits, tree permits you've processed?
Typically, we process from a tree permit standpoint, not land disturbance permits. Now, we're processing around 100 a month. So there's been a lot of tree permits and a lot of trees I've looked at through the years.
How many resistograph readings have you seen?
Hundreds. I own a resistograph.
Pardon?
I own a resistograph.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Just one final point is, you know, here they are holding us responsible for destroying a specimen tree. And, you know, he has said he would have gone back and looked at it, but he can't say whether it's a specimen tree or not. To hold us responsible for these penalties in destroying a specimen tree, you know, I understand the circumstances here make that, but we have provided our evidence that it was not a specimen tree, and I don't believe that has been adequately rebutted to hold us responsible for these type of penalties.
Can you describe a specimen tree?
It's actually defined in your code, but he did acknowledge that it does involve an assessment of the condition of the tree. So it is a tree which qualifies for special consideration for preservation due to its size, type, condition, location, or historical significance, and which also meets the minimum size criteria. And there's a chart for size in your code.
Thank you.
One more thing. Mr. Shostak did say that trees can form new growth, and that is true on something like that. But the fear of something like that happening to a tree that is affected with a cavity that is open, still bleeding, still decaying, is that there will be new growth, additional weight on that same limb, on that affected area where there is a sort of bifurcation of the bark, or included bark as we call it, which puts more pressure on that union, which gives it a higher likelihood to fail. So I do feel like that is an important point to stress there. Just because a tree can grow more doesn't mean it should, because the targets in question, as a tree risk assessor, we look for the likelihood of a tree failing and causing imminent damage or harm to property or persons involved, which in this case would be the sidewalk and Canton Street itself, which is a pretty well-trafficked road. So as a tree risk assessor, it would have a high probability of failure. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
Got a question, actually. This is relating to, I understand there's a penalty of it and $1,000, $29,000. And also there are options. Did I read that Is we able to plant trees on instead as a penalty? Just want to get some clarification. What are really the alternative and specifically really besides the monetary penalty? We're trying to understand so that way before we make the decisions, we'll have good understanding.
Sure. So when a specimen tree is requested for removal, the code requires or asks for 3 times the inches removed. That's normal when a tree is removed by request. So as that request would have been, you would show us how you would meet that 3 times the inches removed. And that can be made with trees planted on property, trees planted on another property, or a payment made to the city tree bank. So that's where that comes from. So those are the options. So they can plant trees on the property, another property, or pay into the tree bank. And paying into the tree bank is based on how much it would cost to plant that tree. So for a 4-inch caliper tree, how much would it cost to plant a 4-inch caliper tree? Or how much, so you go by inches. So how much would it cost to plant an inch? You come up with a value per inch, and that's how much you pay to the city tree bank in order to allow the city to plant trees in the future. In this instance, when we determined the violation and the penalties, we went with that normal number. We did not go with the 8 times, which is what the code requires for removal of trees that are done without permission. So we just went with what the code normally requests. So that's where we wrote the violation. Does that answer your question?
So that $29,000
is the payment to the tree bank for not planting any trees. Yes, correct.
How often do these violations come?
We don't deal with very many of them because most often we get permits for them and we get the information we need. Occasionally we do have a developer that will go outside their limits of disturbance and damage a tree beyond saving, or we may have a homeowner or a tree company that didn't know there's a permitting process and we have to issue a violation. So, there's no standard.
So they had a permit, but it was with wrong information.
The permit was based upon the original resistograph reading, which was incorrect information, yes.
So this is kind of new territory.
This is very new territory, yes.
If there was no violation, they would have still been expected for the recompense of...
If there was no violation and the tree was considered a specimen tree, then they would have been expected to show us how they were going to plant or pay into the tree bank 3 times the inches removed, yes. Which is the same as what the violation was written at.
The owner's responsibility, not an arborist.
Well, the code, that's correct. If they had asked for permission, it would have been the property owner's responsibility. However, when a violation occurs, the code allows us to determine who the responsible party was. And in this situation, the determination was made that the responsible party was the entity that gave us the wrong information in order to make the decision we did.
So my question is, you keep saying if it was a specimen tree, they're saying it's not a specimen tree. Are you saying that for sure it was a specimen tree?
Based upon the information I have now, I would have considered it a specimen tree unless they had given me additional information or I had been able to do another inspection. So based upon the information I have now and in front of me from the time I looked at the tree and from all the different reports, we would have considered it a specimen tree and we would have asked that that limb be pruned off that they are speaking of as the hazard portion of the tree.
Thank you.
One last question.
Sure.
She gave out some really good information that I didn't quite, I understand in theory, so if it's over 25, so if we got a 14-inch limb and we cut it off, the overall, that's the 30-something% of the density of the overall tree or something of that nature?
So what the ANSI standard states is that you're not supposed to remove more than about 25% of the live canopy. So on this tree, removing one limb would have been less than 25% of the live canopy. I wasn't really quite sure of what they were trying to state in their affidavit, where saying that that size of that limb was more than 25% of the size of the trunk or something like that. I didn't quite understand that because I've never heard that and I've never read that in the ANSI standard. So I can't answer what that was meant to mean. But based on the ANSI standard, it's talking about the live canopy, so the green leaves. So removing the percentage of green leaves. So removing one limb, even if it's a large limb, does not remove, on this tree especially, would not have removed more than 25% of the live canopy.
Like, so is the limb dead then in your opinion? If it's live canopy, what's the definite, I guess, if live canopy just?
The green leaves, basically from where the leaves and the branches start to the top of the tree.
Okay.
That's the live canopy. The limb, you know, I'm kind of look at that from, is it dead or not dead? It's either black or white.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how I look at dead.
Okay, no, that's good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Anybody like to make a motion? Let's take a 5-minute adjournment.
Yeah. Thank you.
ask if any board member has a motion. What'll happen is we'll have a motion. If we'll get a second, we'll talk about it. If it gets approved, great. If not, we'll keep going until we come up with a decision.
I would like a motion to not penalize them. While I very much appreciate the city's strong stance on trees and the due diligence that goes into it, it doesn't seem like the intent was there. So, motion, that's my motion.
Okay, second?
I second it.
Okay, now discussion on the topic, opinions.
I feel the opposite of that. I think staff works very hard to try to maintain the tree canopy. It's important to the city. No disrespect meant. I understand how hard it is to get certified as an arborist. I am one myself. So I understand, and I understand mistakes happen. I think part of the argument that I've heard is more rationalization than it is substantive. I mean, I realize I go out Canton Street almost every day. I live out that way, so I know those trees are not in great shape. So do I think 3 times the diameter or the circumference is fair? I probably don't, but I don't think I don't support the denial of it.
Well,
Personally,
I'll continue the discussion. As a board, we sit here month after month when we have meetings, and people come to us because they've made a mistake. They've made an honest mistake, and they asked us to forgive them, and there's not a penalty. I feel like in the city there is a penalty for the tree ordinance, but there's not a financial penalty for anything else. And I'm looking at this like every other mistake that has come before us, and we're like, yes, you made a mistake, you didn't do it on purpose, so have your pool the way you wanted, or have the pool the way it was built. And so I agree with the motion. I feel that that the penalty is harsh for a mistake.
The board does have the option also of determining a lower penalty if you feel that's in line also. There's another option.
In my opinion, although Mr. Perry has fully addressed it, that's a Canton Street that's my walk here. I live off of North Main, and I always walk through that Cantons, and I really enjoy those kind of big trees. They're nice, really fits really sense of that you are in the forest. Even though some of them got old, and I realized that recently we had some trees falling, which is part of actually the concern that actually you guys brought up. In this scenario, it can go both ways. You know, had we have the tree, and being inspected and checked, it may have been survived. There's uncertainty of both ways. And of course, the penalty amount is, for me, it might be so high considering there's some genuine mistakes being made. So my recommendation is I would like to have some tree to be planted. Might not be the tree, which is a $29,000 cost, but I want to see halfway, 1 tree or 2 trees to be planted that can also send the president all the way down. I understand that the city is very strict with the trees, and I do attend the city planning commissions. There are a few properties that on hold, including the Thompson Street, because of the tree reasons and it's been postponed and all that. Might know about it. So I would like to support that, but at the same time, not all penalty to be on that. We can go halfway and then have them plant a few trees, which will cover. That's what I feel.
Other discussion?
Is it possible to just allow them a $1,000 fine?
You can make a motion for, if you want to amend your motion, you can amend it, and yes, that is a possibility. It doesn't have to be the full fine. It could be, what the board determines is fair.
Well, I would make that motion then that there would be a fine of $1,000, not $29,000.
Okay.
Just, can I say something? There's not a fine of $29,000. The $29,000 is related to the cost of planting the trees.
But they pay it.
Or they plant trees.
Right.
They plant trees instead of paying $29,000. It's not a fine.
$29,000.
It's clear.
I thought it was $1,000 fine.
There's a $1,000 fine, and then there's a tree planting requirement, and we
second still stand
Let's-
on amended, or
Well,
is that?
$1,000 fine.
Are you amending?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that.
Second, any discussion?
Yeah, $1,000 isn't enough. I mean, in my mind, it can't be okay. It can't be okay for $1,000 to go out and remove these trees. That just can't be okay. It can't be where you want a tree taken down enough, you do an infill, you take down a $400,000 home to build a $2 million one, it's like, that's fine. $1,000 is all it's gonna cost us to take down 4 or 5 of them. Can't happen.
But
Can't happen.
you're talking about someone who went and applied for a permit and got it granted, not someone who's just willy-nilly just chopping down trees in their backyard. There should be a fine, a substantial fine for someone that doesn't go through the process. Someone did go through the process. We don't think that there was any fraudulent something done here. I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that something was done fraudulently.
I don't think we know that.
They had a permit, though. The permit was granted. No, it's not false.
It was based on certain information that was not correct.
Right, but that, when he said it doesn't happen very often, so it is sort of a one-off. It's not like it's happening every day.
Right. I understand. I'm just telling you, I'm not gonna vote to do that. You have every right in the world to vote the way you wish to. I'm just giving you my opinion in this one vote.
I think from a standpoint, it went through the process. The tree's not stuck back in the back somewhere. It was sitting right on the side of Camp Street, so it's easy to swing back by and see it. So I think that, and me personally, been more questionable if it would have prevented the development of the site. But all they wanted is just a driveway on the other. So left, right, I get it, but at the end of the day, they could easily shifted the driveway over to the right. So I don't think it was intentional. That's where it just sits with me on it. But I understand your concern. I mean, we all want the trees there. I think it went through the effort to get the arbor certification for the standpoint of value in the trees. So I think I could get on board with it. I don't think it sets a precedent. They go cut down a tree and it's only going to cost you $1,000. I mean, they went through the process. I would love to talk offline just of how we're going to give approval permits to cut down a tree off of a reading. Then what is that validation process? How do we validate that so this doesn't happen again for the next one? So I think it's an opportunity for us to learn as a city and take the value that we have with our arborists is great. There, he's been here 16 years. He's vested in it. But how can we do it so that this doesn't happen again in the future? And I don't know trees well enough for that. I can't even say what the thing is they keep talking about. So I just so it doesn't happen in the future.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye for $1,000 fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. 4 in favor, opposed? 3. It'll be $1,000 fine. Settled. Thank you, everybody. That's it. We're adjourned.